Imagine being trapped in your own body. Your mind has made a decision, but your body refuses to obey. Every touch causes a shiver. Every kiss triggers disgust. You want to love, you want to forgive, but your body has its own opinion. This isn't science fiction. This is the reality lived by thousands of women after infidelity. Today, I'll reveal why women who cheat on their husbands often cannot return to their marriage, even when they desperately want to. We'll discover the profound psychological truth expertly explained by Russian psychologist Olga Kesler, but we'll go even deeper into the neurobiology of trauma, evolutionary psychology, and the philosophy of authenticity. Because when we talk about infidelity, it's not just a moral choice, it's a complex psychophysical reaction that reveals much more about us as human beings than we're willing to admit. The question of infidelity is one of the deepest questions of human nature. Throughout history, societies have tried to regulate human sexuality through religion, laws, and customs. But beneath these social constructs lies something much deeper: our biology, our psychology, our evolutionary history. As Olga Kesler, a Russian psychologist with years of experience, said, there is a widespread belief that men do not forgive female infidelity. However, the reality is much more complex. Through her work with numerous women who have cheated on their husbands, Kesler has discovered a fascinating phenomenon that is almost never mentioned in public discussions about infidelity: the body that remembers. Let me tell you a story I've heard too often. A woman cheats on her husband. Perhaps it was a moment of weakness, perhaps it was a deeper emotional connection. Regardless of the reason, her husband finds out about the affair. And instead of leaving her, he changes. A man who was cold and absent suddenly becomes an attentive lover. He buys flowers, opens doors, shows affection in public. And the woman thinks, maybe, after all, for the children, maybe it's worth giving another chance. But when she returns to the marriage, when she tries to rebuild her life with her husband, her body rebels. Nights become agony. Her body doesn't respond to her husband. She feels disgust at his kisses. She shivers at his touch. And the more she tries to overcome these feelings, the more her body rebels. This isn't hysteria. This isn't just a psychological reaction. This is deep bodily memory. As Kesler noted, the body remembers the reasons. And those reasons haven't disappeared just because the husband changed his behavior at the last minute. Neurobiology of rejection. To understand why the body reacts this way, we need to look at what happens in our brain and nervous system when we go through emotionally intense experiences. When we're exposed to prolonged stress in a relationship, whether it's neglect, emotional coldness, or even psychological abuse, our amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for processing emotions, begins to associate certain stimuli with a sense of danger. When someone you love repeatedly disappoints you, your body begins to associate their touch, their smell, even the sound of their voice with feelings of insecurity and pain. Research conducted at the University of Toronto has shown that women have a particularly strong neurological reaction to emotional rejection. PET brain scans show that women experience the pain of emotional betrayal in the same areas of the brain that activate during physical pain. Literally, emotional pain for the female brain is real physical pain. When a woman decides to cheat on her husband, it's often not just a decision for sex, it's her body's decision to seek safety and emotional satisfaction that she's missing. And when that new source of safety and satisfaction is removed, the body rebels. Evolutionary perspective. From an evolutionary psychology standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Through thousands of years of evolution, women have developed sensitivity to the quality of their relationships because not only their survival, but also the survival of their offspring depended on these relationships. When a woman feels that her partner isn't providing the emotional security or resources she needs, her body begins to look for alternatives. This isn't a conscious decision. This is a deep biological impulse that transcends our conscious control. Dr. David Buss, a leading evolutionary psychologist at the University of Texas, has found through his research that women primarily seek emotional connections outside of marriage when they feel they lack emotional support in their primary relationship. Unlike men, who often seek physical pleasure, women seek emotional connection, something their body recognizes as necessary for long-term survival. Philosophy of authenticity. This struggle between mind and body raises a deep philosophical question about authenticity. What does it mean to be authentic? Is authenticity about following our moral principles, social norms, and obligations? Or is authenticity about listening to our body, our instincts, our deepest needs? Philosopher Charles Taylor, in his work, The Ethics of Authenticity, talks about how modern society values authenticity, but often neglects the fact that authenticity isn't just individual, but also relational. Being authentic doesn't just mean following your desires, but also developing relationships that allow for true self-realization. For a woman in this situation, the question of authenticity becomes extremely complex. Staying in the marriage might mean respecting social norms and obligations, but at the cost of suppressing deep bodily and emotional signals. Leaving the marriage might mean following those signals, but at the cost of social condemnation and breaking important connections. Social consequences. Society often tells us that infidelity is simply a matter of moral choice. "You should have thought about the consequences before you cheated on your husband," is often the response these women receive, even from their closest friends. But as Kesler pointed out, the situation is much more complex. Only a psychologist will understand this woman, because a psychologist can tell her that she is a completely normal woman and that her body is seeking happiness, that she is worthy of love, that the reason why she left still exists, and that the body remembers those reasons. Society tells us that divorce is the last option, especially when children are involved. But what if the price of staying in the marriage is long-term damage to mental and physical health? What if suppressed body signals lead to chronic stress, depression, or even psychosomatic illnesses? Research on infidelity and health. Research conducted at the University of Michigan has shown that women who stay in emotionally unsatisfying relationships have a higher risk of developing cardiovascular diseases, autoimmune disorders, and chronic pain. A study published in the Journal of Marriage and Family showed that women who suppress their emotional needs in marriage have twice the risk of developing depression compared to women who chose divorce and rebuilding their lives. Dr. Esther Perel, a renowned psychotherapist and author of The State of Affairs, Rethinking Infidelity, emphasizes that infidelity is often not just a matter of sexual satisfaction, but a deep psychological need for rediscovering oneself. Infidelity, she says, is often more about the search for a new version of oneself than the search for a new partner. Why do men react differently? It's interesting to note that men often react differently to infidelity. While some men also feel physical aversion to their partners after they've cheated on them and decided to stay in the relationship, research shows that men can more often separate the physical and emotional components of a relationship. Partly this is due to different neurological structures. The male brain generally has less connection between emotional and physical centers, allowing them to more easily compartmentalize these aspects. Partly it's due to evolutionary heritage and different reproductive strategies. And partly it's due to socialization. Society teaches men to suppress emotional reactions and focus on the physical. However, this doesn't mean men don't suffer. They often suffer in different ways, through increased propensity for risky behavior, abuse of alcohol or other substances, or through projecting their pain onto other aspects of life. Infidelity as a symptom, not a cause. One of the most important discoveries of modern relationship psychology is that infidelity rarely comes out of nowhere. In most cases, infidelity is a symptom of deeper problems in the relationship, not their cause. As Kesler says, the reason why she left still exists. Often, a husband who suddenly becomes attentive and caring after discovering an affair only confirms what the woman already knew, that he is capable of love and attention he wasn't giving her before. This raises a difficult question: why did it take a crisis for the behavior to change? And more importantly, can one trust that this change will be permanent? Trauma and repetition compulsion. A concept that can help understand this phenomenon is what psychologists call repetition compulsion, or trauma bonding. When we're exposed to cycles of emotional neglect followed by intense periods of attention and love, our brain can develop a particularly strong but unhealthy connection with the source of that instability. This is similar to what happens in Stockholm Syndrome, where captives develop emotional attachment to their captors. When someone denies you emotional security, then occasionally gives it to you, it can create an extremely strong emotional attachment, even when you know the relationship isn't healthy. Many women who stay in marriage after infidelity experience this type of attachment. Intellectually, they know they should leave, but emotionally, they feel unable to break the connection. Recovery process. As Kesler said, women who decide to stay in their marriage after infidelity have two paths: leave their husband and live their own life, or undergo long therapy and eventually overcome themselves. If they choose the second option, it's important to understand that this isn't a simple process of overcoming oneself. It's a deep process of healing and reestablishing safety in the relationship. Couples therapy that focuses on emotionally focused therapy, EFT, has proven most effective in helping couples recover from infidelity. Through this approach, couples learn how to recognize and express their deepest emotional needs, how to create a secure connection, and how to relate to each other in a way that heals rather than deepens wounds. However, the recovery process requires honest commitment from both partners. The husband must be ready not just for short-term behavior change, but for long-term transformation in how he relates to his wife. The wife must be ready to face her deep emotional wounds and give a chance for a new relationship to develop. This isn't a simple process, and there's no guarantee of success. But for couples who are ready for this difficult journey, there is a possibility of creating a relationship that is deeper, more honest, and more secure than it was before the infidelity. Self-knowledge and authenticity. Regardless of which path a woman chooses, the key step is self-knowledge. Understanding one's own desires, needs, and boundaries. Understanding why the body reacted the way it did. As renowned psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk said in his book, "The Body Keeps the Score," our body carries the truth that our mind might not yet be ready to admit. Listening to the body isn't weakness, it's the path to true authenticity. Philosopher Simone de Beauvoir spoke about authenticity as the courage to accept our freedom and responsibility. "Woman is not born a woman," she wrote, "she becomes one." This famous statement speaks about how society shapes our understanding of gender, but it also speaks about the possibility of choice. Every woman has the possibility to choose an authentic life, a life that is aligned with her deepest values and needs. For a woman facing a decision after infidelity, this might mean the courage to accept the signals of her body, even when those signals contradict social expectations or her own ideals about marriage and family. Emotional intelligence and self-awareness. Psychologists like Daniel Goleman emphasize that emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, is crucial for making healthy life decisions. For a woman facing aversion to her husband after infidelity, emotional intelligence means recognizing physical sensations as important emotional signals, understanding the deeper needs behind those emotions, communicating those needs in a healthy way, making decisions that are aligned with those deep emotional truths. This doesn't mean blindly following every emotional impulse. It means recognizing emotions as important information that should inform our decisions, not dictate them. Boundaries and self-respect. The central question for every woman in this situation is, what are my boundaries? What can I accept and what can't I? Boundaries aren't walls that separate us from others. They are clear definitions of what is acceptable in a relationship. Healthy boundaries protect our self-respect and allow us to love from a position of strength, not desperation. For some women, a boundary might be, I cannot be in an intimate relationship with someone who has emotionally neglected me for years, even if they now show change. For others, a boundary might be, I'm willing to work on the relationship, but only if we both go to therapy and if I see continuous, not just momentary, change. Psychologist Brené Brown, known for her work on vulnerability and courage, emphasizes that boundaries are key to empathy. We cannot truly empathize with others if we're not willing to set boundaries, she says. Paradoxically, our ability to love deeply is connected to our ability to say no when necessary. Social pressure and independent decision-making. Social pressure plays a huge role in the decisions women make after infidelity. What will people say? How will the children react? Will I end up alone? These fears are real and legitimate. But as research conducted at Stanford University has shown, women who make decisions primarily based on fear of social condemnation often end up with deeper regret than those who make decisions based on their own values and needs. Dr. Jennifer Finney Boylan, author and professor at Columbia University, writes about authenticity as a moral imperative. Being inauthentic, she argues, isn't just harmful to ourselves, it's harmful to everyone who loves us, because we deny them the opportunity to love our true self. Forgiveness and healing. Regardless of which decision a woman makes, the process of forgiveness is key to emotional health and moving on with life. But it's important to understand what forgiveness really is. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. Forgiveness isn't pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness isn't restoring trust to someone who hasn't earned it. Forgiveness is liberation from the poison of bitterness and revenge. It's acknowledging that we cannot change the past, but we can decide how that past will affect our present and future. For a woman who decides to leave her marriage after infidelity, forgiveness might mean letting go of hatred toward her ex-husband so she can build a new, healthier life. For a woman who decides to stay, forgiveness is a more complex process that involves creating a new relationship on the ruins of the old one. Psychologist Fred Luskin, author of Forgive for Good and director of the Stanford Forgiveness Project, defines forgiveness as the peace and understanding that come from blaming what happened, taking life less personally, and taking responsibility for how you feel. Children and the decision to stay. One of the most common concerns of women thinking about leaving a marriage after infidelity is the impact on children. Maybe after all, for the children, is a phrase Kesler often hears from her clients. But what does research say about the impact of unhealthy marriages on children? Research conducted over more than 20 years at the University of Virginia shows that children who grow up in high-conflict homes have a higher risk of developing anxiety, depression, and behavioral problems than children of divorced parents who successfully cooperate. Dr. Judith Wallerstein, a pioneer in research on the impact of divorce on children, after 25 years of following children of divorced parents, concluded, children don't need their parents' perfect marriage. What they need is an emotionally healthy relationship with both parents, either together or separately. For a woman thinking about staying for the children, the important question isn't just, will divorce harm my children, but also, what kind of relationship model am I showing my children if I stay in a marriage where I feel unhappy and disconnected? New beginning. Regardless of which decision a woman makes after infidelity, to stay or to go, she faces the challenge of creating a new beginning. If she decides to leave, she must face all the practical and emotional challenges of building a new life. If she decides to stay, she must build a completely new relationship with her husband, not try to fix the old one. As Dr. John Gottman, one of the world's leading experts on marital relationships, says, every stable relationship is the result of a couple who has created their own unique way of connecting. After infidelity, a couple who decides to stay together must create a completely new way of connecting, one that acknowledges the wounds from the past but doesn't allow those wounds to define the future. Conclusion: the body never lies. Let's return to the starting point, a body that refuses to lie. A body that rebels against a mind that has decided to ignore deep emotional truths. A body that remembers the reasons that haven't disappeared just because the other person has decided to change their behavior at the last minute. Kesler's observation that the body remembers aligns with the latest discoveries in the field of psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology, the science that studies the connection between our mind, our nervous system, our endocrine system, and our immune system. Our emotions aren't just abstract feelings. They are biochemical reactions that affect every cell in our body. When a woman feels aversion toward her husband after infidelity, it's not hysteria, stubbornness, or manipulation. It's a deep biological reaction that comes from the oldest parts of our brain, parts that evolved to protect us from danger and guide us towards safety and pleasure. By ignoring these signals, a woman isn't just suppressing her emotions, she's suppressing her basic biological system for survival and flourishing. And while society may value sacrifice and self-denial, Our biology is designed for something else, for survival, for prosperity, for connection and joy. If you're a woman facing this difficult decision, or if you know someone who is facing this decision, I want you to remember a few things. First, there is no universally correct answer. Each situation is unique, each relationship has its history, each person has their needs and boundaries. Second, the body remembers. If you feel resistance, disgust, or coldness toward your partner after infidelity, it's not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that your body remembers the reasons that brought you to this point. Third, regardless of which decision you make, you deserve support, not judgment. Infidelity isn't a one-dimensional moral choice. It's a complex human situation that requires understanding, not simplified judgments. And finally, know that you are not alone. Thousands of women face these choices every day. And while each must find her own path, we all share one common experience, the experience of a body that remembers, that knows, that refuses to lie even when the mind tries to rationalize or adapt. Your truth is written in your body. And while you may choose to ignore that truth for the sake of convenience, social expectations, or fear of the unknown, that truth will not disappear. It will remain, smoldering beneath the surface, waiting to be recognized, respected, and finally, lived. Because in the end, as Maya Angelou said, the truth never hurts the right thing. Now, I'd like to hear your experiences and thoughts. Have you ever found yourself in a situation similar to the one I've described? Have you felt how your body remembers and reacts in ways your mind might not fully understand? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story could help others who may feel alone in their experience. Of course, you can remain anonymous if you wish. Also, if you like this content and want to see more videos about relationship psychology, deep human experiences, and truths that society often neglects, subscribe to this channel. Press the bell for notifications so you'll be notified about new videos as soon as they're published. Thank you for watching. Together we can create a community that values truth, authenticity, and a deep understanding of human experience.